What's cracking, people? Welcome back to the channel, and this is the first video in a very long time. It's like 2 months now, but that's fine because it's a special one. It's the start of a new series called Tech Menu on the channel, where I'll basically be doing tech-related stuff. So for example, today we're building a PC, and I'm very excited actually. You might be thinking, why am I building a PC? Just for fun? Just because I'm a baller like that? No. This PC is actually from my parents. It's going to be the Christmas present, and I'm actually very excited because they're running a very old computer. Yeah, just before we get started, I just want to plug in my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Camoose. See a link somewhere there. I'll just pop it up. Yeah, alright. And what else? That's pretty much it. So we'll hop right into it. And I'll start by rounding off the parts right here. So this is going to be an AMD Ryzen build. We're running an AMD Ryzen 5 2600. It's a great 6-core 12-thread processor, good for basically anything nowadays. It's a bit of an older generation, but it'll work out perfectly. My parents don't need a super powerful system, so we don't have to worry about that. Next, I guess we'll go with the RAM right here. It's the very popular Corsair Vengeance LPX, 16 gigs of DDR4 at 3200 speed. It is the white model, and you guys will see why. It'll look great, trust me. Next, we also have the SSD right here. It is the 1TB ADATA Ultimate SU800. The same SSD that's actually in my system right here, except this one is 1TB, and it's going to be the only drive. So should be enough. 1TB should be enough for the storage needs. Next, we'll go with the case, I guess. This is the Thermaltake Versa H17. It's a great micro ATX case, low budget case. Comes with a fan and power supply shroud. It is an acrylic side panel right here, so you can see all your beautiful parts in all its glory. With the motherboard, we have the Gigabyte B450M DS3H, another budget board. It'll work out fine for my parents' build. They don't need anything that's too high end. And for our GPU of the hour, this is the Asus GTX 1060. It is the dual model, and you might be thinking, hey, why are you giving your parents a GPU, a full-on graphics card? They're not gaming or anything, right? You're right, they're not gaming. But I had this lying around, so why not throw it in the build? Belongs to my brother. He has a new GPU, so I'm gonna throw this one in there. This is white, so it'll match everything else. As for the power supply, is this guy right here. It came with the case. It's a 450 watt unit. Unfortunately, I might get some heat for this, but it's not 80 plus rated. Kind of scary. I know. Don't worry about it. We'll replace it in the future. Trust me. As for cooling, I have a couple of RGB fans right here, and we'll be sticking that in the case. And as for extras, we'll be using some fan extensions, some fan splitters, because this only has one fan header, I believe, and some zip ties, and what else? Oh yes, we're using some white carbon fiber vinyl wrap to wrap the SSD and the power supply. Alright, without further ado, let's hop right into it. Alright, so to start off, we're going to start with our CPU and our motherboard. So we're going to dice this open. Open her up. Pretty excited about the PC in a little while. Hopefully you're as excited too with your new PC for building it. Alright, so we have some paperwork here, and right here we have our Ryzen 5 2600. Again, great 6-core 12-thread processor, and it'll work out just fine for my parents' build. Then we have the cooler itself, which we'll be using. It is the stock heatsink that we don't have to spend extra money on the cooler, so that works out well. So for the motherboard, I'm going to turn around here for you guys. Just a sec. We'll need our SATA cables to connect the SSD, and this motherboard comes with 2 SATA cables, one right angle, one of the straight angle ones. take this out, set this to the side. Also going to need the I/O shield, which will be popping into the case. Set that to the side as well. And wow, this is a basic user manual, but yeah, we need the user manual. And you don't need this, just like get rid of it. It's really useless. These drivers are out of date. Who uses CD drives anyways? Alright, so once you have your motherboard and your CPU out, a few tools that we're going to need, not a knife, but we'll need a screwdriver for sure. It's very important that you have a screwdriver. Any length will do, but I do prefer a longer one. But yeah, nice screwdriver. Make sure it's full upside, by the way. And you'll also need, well, this you don't really need, but it's great to have, some zip ties. I have a few zip ties here from an older build. And if you want, you can also use some Velcro ties for cable management. And a pair of scissors to cut those zip ties. Anyways, let's get back to the build. So, if you're building an Intel system, it's going to be very similar. Inserting the CPU for both platforms are very easy. So for AMD and AM4, you're going to have to take this little bar here, lift it to the side, lift it up, and take out your CPU. So when you have your CPU, make sure when you're lifting it up, make sure you lift it up from the sides and not the top, because that's where the heat spreader is, and don't touch the pins at the bottom either. So for our CPU, you can see there's a tiny ass little tiny ass arrow, golden arrow right there. And that's where you're gonna have to line up with the motherboard. And on the motherboard, the tiny ass little arrow is right over here. So this is the little arrow that you're gonna line up. It's in this corner right here. Probably it's hard to see, but you'll be able to see when you're building your PC. That's a tiny little arrow. So you're gonna take your CPU, line up the two arrows, slowly but surely drop it right in there. It should go in pretty snug. And give it a little wiggle, make sure it's in. Nice. And you're gonna take this bar, put it back down under the latch. You're gonna feel a little bit of pressure, and that's very normal. And there you go. You installed your CPU. Alright, so after you install your CPU, the next part will be the CPU cooler. Let me just get this out of the box real quick. So once again, if you want to save some money, you can go with the stock cooler. Either it's Intel or AMD. Obviously the AMD cooler is going to be better, because the Intel one's kind of dinky and not great. But yeah, if you want to save some money, go with the stock cooler. If not, cooler installation is going to be very different depending on what brand of cooler you're using, what platform and all of that. So this will be the one part that I'm going to have to leave you for a little bit, but don't worry, we'll be back after we install the cooler. But if you are installing the stock AMD cooler, you can follow along and I'll teach you how to do that as well. So on the motherboard, you'll see that there's these two little plates, I guess you would call. We're going to have to remove those. So take your screwdriver and get them out of here. So after you took off all the plates, the two plates from the motherboard, you're going to want to keep the back plate in because there's a back plate that you're going to have to screw the cooler into. So you're going to take your CPU cooler. Now you can see with the AMD stock heatsink, you can see that there's already pre-applied thermal paste. So we don't have to worry about that. But on other coolers, you're going to have to apply thermal paste. So you're going to take your CPU cooler and you're going to line up the 4 screws on all the 4 corners with the 4 holes on the motherboard. So let's just do that. Okay, once it's lined up, you're going to want to take your screwdriver, and it's not possible to screw it in too much or over tighten it because the screws will just stop turning. Okay, so you're going to want to screw in opposite sides. That's what I like to do. So basically you just want to keep screwing until it stops turning. And if you switch sides like this, then you'll be able to make sure that the cooler sits into place properly and that no sides are lifted up, which you definitely don't want. Could be very dangerous. And right there, that stopped turning, so we're good. go back to this corner here. Boom, stop turning, nice. Keep doing this one, okay, stop turning. And stop turning. So with this cable, it's going to power the fan right here, and you're going to plug it into where it says CPU fan on your motherboard. It'll be closer to the top area. So take that pin, or take that header, plug it in, and we'll just kind of let it rest right here a little bit. Whatever, alright. Just stop that there. Alright, so after you have your cooler installed, we're going to be moving on to the RAM. Now RAM is going to be one of the easier parts, so just follow along. It'll be quick and easy. I'm going to open it up. Cut the sticker or the little piece of tape. So you can see with a nice kit of white RAM, the white Corsair Vengeance. It's a pretty cool kit. Got two sticks here. Let's just take these guys out. Okay, let's set this to the side here. Alright, so for RAM installation, it's pretty easy, and if you check your motherboard manual, it'll actually tell you which slots to put your RAM in. So in our case, we have 2 sticks of RAM, so we will be populating the 2nd and 4th slots. So it'll be the 2 gray slots on our motherboard. So once you figure that out on your motherboard, you can go ahead and open up these clips. And this one as well. Alright, so if you look at your RAM here, you're going to see that there's a little notch right here. And that means that this is actually keyed and it can only go in one way. Alright, so once you figured out which way it goes, just gonna slot it right in there. And with a little bit of force, you're gonna wanna use your 2 fingers, push it in until the 2 clips pop back up. So same thing with the next stick. Just line it up. Once again, use 2 fingers, pop it in, and the clips will come up. And is that it for everything on the motherboard? That looks like it is. Great. So you finished with the motherboard. Now it's time to place this motherboard into our case. Alright, you're gonna take out your case from its box, and if you have, well, everyone's gonna have the side panel, but take off the side panel, and there's gonna be 2 thumb screws in the back for this one, so we're gonna unscrew those. Good thing these aren't super tight. Ha. Take off the acrylic panel. My assistant, grab this please. Thank you very much. Assistant, here you go. Alright, in the case you'll find a nice little bag of accessories, which will come in handy. But if you check out our case real quick, we have a fan back here. Not to worry about that too much just yet. But mainly what we're looking out for is these motherboard standoffs where your motherboard are going to rest. So if we check our motherboard, and then let me have a look real quick. We have 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 holes on the motherboard, and that's going to have to slot into the holes into our case. If we look at our case real quick, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have 1 hole that won't be populated, so that's fine, don't worry about that. 6 holes, 6 is more than enough for a micro ATX motherboard. Alright, so remember the I/O shield that I told you to take out from the motherboard box? Now is the time to use it. So, I'm going to open it up. If you are using a higher end motherboard, a lot of the times the I/O shield will already be pre-installed, which is a great feature actually. So to insert the motherboard, what am I saying? To insert the I/O shield, there's kind of like a few rules of thumb that we could follow. First is which way does it go? So normally there's going to be either text or kind of like a nice design on one side. On this side there's all the text that says what kind of ports your motherboard will have. That side will be facing the outside of the case or the back side of the case. And to see like which way it goes, either this way or this way, you're gonna have to line it up with your motherboard. So I know that this is where the audio ports are. Audio ports are on the bottom, which means it goes like this, makes in the back of the case. So we're just going to take this and pop it right in. Wow, there. So to insert the I/O shield, you're gonna have to push it in on kind of each side. Make sure you hear all these clicks. Make sure it's all clipped in. And good to go. Next will be the motherboard. Now, don't worry, you can hold it by the heatsink right here. We're gonna line up these ports with the ports on the back. The way I like to do it is put it in at an angle first, and then line up the ports, and then make sure that they all rest on the motherboard standoffs. We're gonna change the angle so you guys can see a little bit. Alright, so you're gonna take your motherboard and you're going to slot it into the case. Once again, lining up the I/O on the back first. We're gonna place it in at an angle. And once it's into the I/O shield, we're gonna let it sit. And it's in. Motherboard is in. And we can go ahead and screw her down. So you're gonna take your box or your little bag or box of accessories right here. Alright, so in our bag we had these screws that says used for 3.5-inch HDD, so these are for hard drives. This one says used for 2.5-inch SSDs, so these are SSDs, we will be using these. And the unlabeled bag will be used for the motherboard. So this is what we're going to open up. So with that motherboard, it actually comes with 2 extra standoffs that we could use, but I don't have the tool to use them, so we're not going to install them, that's why. But anyways, we'll be using these screws to screw in the motherboard. So once again, there's 6 points, so we're going to screw in all 6 points. And yeah, it should be a quick and easy one. You guys should be good. I believe in you. One quick note is make sure you don't screw it in too tight, because you could strip it, and if you do want to take it apart, then you're going to take the stand off with it. So make sure you don't screw it in too tight. I just dropped the screw. Once it is screwed in, the motherboard is good to go. And next we will be moving on to the storage. So we're going to move on to our SSD. Alright, so now we're going to be working with our SSD and our power supply. We're going to be wrapping it with carbon fiber vinyl wrap, which you got right here. For the SSD, we'll be wrapping the front, so it's going to be on display in the front of the case. And for the power supply, we'll be wrapping the side, because there's a little hole in the case that you can see the power supply, and the stick is kind of ugly, so we're going to get rid of that. So let's just start. done. Alright, so that's done. Now this is my best work. This is my first time technically, so if it looks bad, I'm blaming it on that. But it's not too bad. I think it looks okay. So we're gonna wrap the power supply next. Alright, that's the power supply done. So we got the power supply, SSD, both wrapped and ready to go. Alright, so now we're going to be working with our case a little bit more. And we're going to want to take off the back panel right here. So same as before, there's going to be 2 thumb screws. Make sure you're not losing these thumb screws. Send this side over here. Pop this panel off. So we're going to be working with our case cables right here. So we're going to undo this little guy. We have all the case cables that we will be working with in just 1 second. But first, we're going to be grabbing our power supply and we're going to be installing it into the case. Before we do that though, I'm just going to take off this plastic thing again. Don't worry, these cables won't be on display in the front. I know they're ugly as hell, they're hideous. Which is why we have extensions. Alright, so these are all kind of clipped together. I'll see how I want to do with that later, but before we do, we're going to install the power supply. So make sure the fan is facing down on the case, especially if you have ventilation down there. You're going to want the fan to face down. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to face the fan down, and we're going to stick it right into the case. Alright, so once it's in, we're going to be grabbing some screws and screwing it in. It's going to be 4 points to screw in. Alright, so with our case right now, we have mainly 2 sets of cables. It's going to be the power supply cables right here, all this junk, and case cables right here, which is where our power button, USBs, audio, stuff like that will be connected to the motherboard so that they all work. So we will be dealing with the case cables first. So before we run into that, I'm going to kind of move the cables around, put them through the holes that I feel like will make the most sense. So you guys can do that too. And yeah, that way the cables don't have to travel as much. And just to make sure that makes the most sense. So I'm going to be doing that real quick. Alright, so right now we're on B-cam because we're going to get a closer look at these little ports here, these little headers. Alright, so now we're going to work with the USB 3, and we're going to plug this into this little header right here. That's a USB 3.0 header. Let's try and get this guy in. There we go. Make sure it's in all the way. It only goes in one way, so you can't get that wrong. Next we'll go USB 2, USB 2.0. I'm going to kind of push it under the USB 3 cable here. And we're going to pull it a little bit this way. Okay. Same thing as the USB 3. This thing can only go in one way. So I'm going to plug it in to this guy over here. Make sure it's all the way in, just like that. Alright, now for the tiny little guys, which are these ones. These ones are, these guys over here, these guys are very annoying. So I'm going to put on the screen right now a chart of where each cable goes. So we're going to start with the HDD LED, which goes on the bottom left hand side. It'll be positive on the left,
So find that little arrow that'll show up here. Stick that guy right in. Just like that. And then right next to that is going to be the reset switch, which will be this guy right over here. And it'll be positive on the right side this time. So let's stick that guy in. Boom. On top of the HDD LED will be the power LED. This one is split into two separate ones, like this. It'll be positive on the left side. And these ones have a plus sign or negative sign, so it should be pretty easy to know which one's which. Positive on the left, negative on the right. Okay, that one's in. Last but not least, we have the power switch, this guy right here. And this one will be positive on the left, so find that little arrow on the back side. Make sure the little arrow is on the left side. And plug that guy right in. Now those little guys are done. Alright, now for our final case cable. It'll be the HD audio cable, which will allow you to use your headphone jack and microphone jack and all that jazz. So this one will say HD audio right here. This one will go at the very bottom in that little corner, a little white header right there. So again, only goes one way. And we'll plug this guy right in. Okay, make sure it's in all the way. And we're good to go for that cable.
Alright, so next we're going to be working on the case and we'll be adding some fans in. So these are some RGB fans that I had lying around, and these should do just fine in terms of cooling this case. So let's start with that. But first, we need to take off the front panel, which is pretty simple. Don't be afraid to use some force because you're supposed to. Just get a nice pull, just like that. The cables will be kind of stuck in there, so we're just gonna have to maneuver around that. Alright, so we're gonna kind of flip it over so it's easier to see. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to be installing these two case fans. So, with the case fan, when you put the fan in, you're going to want to make sure that if you're putting on the front, that this frame, I guess you would call it, the fan, is facing inwards, so it's an intake. So remember, air goes in this way, and the air will come out this way. If it goes like this, it means that air is being exhausted this way, and it goes out this way. Just make sure that the air is always going to go through this way. If that makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense. Alright, so we're going to be installing these case fans. And we're going to run a cable through. Let's see what the best hole is. So I'm going to install these two fans and we'll be right back. Alright, so this is what a case fan screw looks like. So we're going to be using 8 of these screws for the two fans in the front. Anyways, back to installing case fans. Now that the case fans are in, time to put the front panel back on, and we're going to wire up all the fans in the case. We have 3 fans, but only 1 fan header on the motherboard, which is why we have the extensions and the splitters. So let's get to that. Alright, so now we're going to put the front panel back on. So same thing as before, don't be afraid to kind of snap it back in. That's what these things are supposed to do. Give it a nice smack here and there. Alright, things in. And now we're going to wire up the fans and the RGB for the front fans. So here we have a few cables. First of all, we have a extension cable, which is just a single fan to single fan. And yeah, this will be an extension. Then we're going to be using 2 splitters, which one splitter will be connected to one of these ends, and then we'll have 3 headers for the 3 fans in our case. And we'll also be using this RGB cable, RGB splitter cable, because we do have 2 RGB fans in front, so this will be able to allow us to control the RGB through the software. So let's wire that right now. I'm going to start with this extension cable, and there's only one header like I said before, and that header is right over here. Let's connect that in there. Okay. And I'm going to wire this fan through the top hole right over here. It's going to be hard to see, but a lot of times cases will have that hole there for you. Okay, and now I'm going to wire the extension cable through that same hole. Now that back here, I'm going to connect a splitter to the extension. Then I'm going to connect another splitter to the splitter that we just connected in. And that's going to be that. I'm going to flip the case around so you guys can see what I'm doing back here. So, here we have the little fan cable contraption. And we got all the other front fan cables right here. So we're going to connect the rear fan to one of the splitters. And keep in mind the rear fan is actually a 3-pin, while these are all 4 pins, but that doesn't really matter. Stick it in there anyways. Then we're going to connect the actual fan part to the splitter. Okay, then we're going to worry about the RGB. So we actually have these little pins, and these guys will be used to connect the RGB to the motherboard. So we're going to take one of these pins, connect it to the RGB cable on the fans, and take another one, connect it to the other RGB cable. Okay, that's good. So for this motherboard, there's only one RGB header. Oops, I'm gonna cut myself with a knife there. Alright, so now we're going to plug in this RGB cable onto the motherboard. So the little arrow, there's a little arrow on the cable here which designates that's where the 12-volt sign is supposed to go. So for the motherboard here, the 12-volt sign is at the top. So that's how we're going to plug it in. Just like that. And where do I want to wire this? Let's wire this through the bottom of here. Okay, now let's flip it back to this side. Okay, so we have 2 RGB accessories. We're going to connect them, make sure the arrows line up to this cable here. So that goes there. This one goes like this. Okay, now all the fans and the RGB are wired up. Next, we will move on to the SSD, then we'll do the power cables, we'll finish off with the GPU. So let's get right to it. Alright, so next we're going to work on the SSD, and this SSD is going to be on display in the front, right over here. One of the main reasons why I wrapped it. So the case actually comes with a few accessories to install SSDs onto the case. So we're going to be using these two. Let me show you what this looks like real quick. Alright, so these two are going to be used to attach the SSD to the case, and it's going to be something like this. So the screw is going to go through, and it's going to be something like that. Okay, so now we're going to attach these together. We only need 3. The 4th one is kind of occupied already, so we don't need it. Now let's attach these together. Then we're going to screw them onto the SSD. So the ports or the connections are over here, and we want the connections to face this way because that's where the cable is. That's where the cable holes are. These holes over here. So it's going to be like this. And since the top left corner right here is already there, we don't need that, which means we only need the other 3 sides. So that's where we're going to screw it into. And let's screw these guys in. Okay, so once these are screwed in, we can now attach it onto the case. So for the case, it's going to be kind of weird because there's going to be this there's a bigger hole here. I don't know if you can see. There's a bigger hole here. We're gonna put the screws into there, and we're gonna slide it to the right a little bit so that it can stay in. Because there's a smaller part here and a bigger hole here. Put in the bigger hole, slide it so it stays in. That's what we're gonna do. So next, we're going to be connecting the SSD to the motherboard with the SATA cables, and we're going to be using these extensions to connect the power supply to power everything, since the power supply cables are ugly as hell. Okay, so remember from the beginning of the video when I said to take out the SATA cables from the motherboard? Now it's finally time to use it. So these are the SATA cables. We're going to take one of them because that's all we need. Open her up. Okay, now there's a few options here, or two options actually. There is a right angle and just a straight angle. It's two different cables, and then on the other side they're both straight angles. So in this situation, I'm going to use one of the right angle ones, so that way the cable management can be a little cleaner. So SATA cables only go in one way into the drives. So one's going to go into the SSD, other one will be going to the SATA headers right over here. I'm going to be using the bottom one. So I'm going to head around onto the back. I'm just going to plug this guy in. Just like that. And I'm going to route the cable. So it comes up through this hole right here. If I can find it. There we go. And I'm gonna plug it in to the very bottom one. There we go. Hit that click, which means we're good to go. And the SSD will be able to be read by the motherboard. You can always save your SATA cables if you're going to add like a hard drive or another SSD for future upgrades. Anyways, next we'll be working with these power supply cables. Alright, so if you're using cable extensions like me, this kit I got off Amazon, and these are actually pretty nice. I have these same ones in my own case. Alright, so this kit comes with cable combs. That way you can keep the cable management nice and clean throughout the build. But in this situation, we'll be using 3 sets of cables. The big 24 pin for the motherboard, the 8-pin EPS for the CPU, and we have 2 VGA cables, or 2 cables that we could use for the GPU. But for our purposes, we only have 1 6-pin, so we don't need one of them. We only need 1 cable. So we're going to comb these cables, and we'll be able to attach it, and we'll be good to go. Alright, so we have the cables nice and combed to the amount that we need. So now we're going to start plugging some cables in. Alright, so the first cable that we'll start with is the big 24 pin. This guy goes right over here, and the pin, or the little latch, is on the right side. So that's how we're going to plug it in. Maybe not hear a click. Probably not in this situation. Okay, this should be in. And then I'm going to run the cable through here, run to the back. Next we'll work with the 8-pin EPS. I'm going to stick the cable through the hole on the top here. So let's make sure that these cables are connected. Just like this. Face the clip to the bottom side. And we'll plug it right in. There we go, with the clip. Okay, this guy can just chill here. And last but not least is going to be the VGA cable. For this guy, we have a couple options. One is to run it through here. Second, we'll run it through the bottom. But this one isn't being used, so I'm going to use this one. And we'll leave it like this for now. So, time to move on to the backside. Alright, so this might look like a big mess of cables, and it is, I can't lie to you. But just take it one cable at a time, and it should be pretty simple. So I'm going to start off with the 8-pin EPS, which is this guy right here, the 8-pin right here. And we're just going to connect these two together, just like that. Now this cable is good to go. Then we're going to plug in the big 24-pin, just like that. And finally, we have our 6-pin, our VGA cable. So let's attach these two together, make sure these two are attached, like that. Then we'll connect it right here, make sure the clip is together, and we're good to go. Now I'm going to do some cable management, and we'll be back. One quick note before I forget, I'm going to plug in a SATA cable to the SSD so that it can be powered. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so here is my cable management job, and clearly it's not the best, but it'll do just fine since there is a huge basement down here for all the cables. I'm sure you guys can do better, but this will do just fine for now. Alright, now we're on to our last part, which is the graphics card, the GTX 1060. And a few years ago this is a decent card, pretty good card actually. Nowadays it's a bit of a lower end, it's time to upgrade if you had one of these, but I had this lying around, so why not use it, right? So to install a graphics card, what you're going to want to do is unscrew these expansion slots on the back. Normally it'll be the second and third slot, so that's what we're going to take off. So for your graphics card, depends on what kind of graphics card you have. Since we do have a 2-slot card, then we're only going to need to remove 2 slots. If you have a 3-slot card, you have to remove 3 slots and so on. Or if you have other PCIe accessories, this is what you're going to have to do. You have to remove as many slots as you need to. So let's open her up. Alright, so this is a very nice card actually. Really like the design of it. The white matches, hopefully it's going to match everything. So what we want to do, take off this little protective piece first. Then you're going to want to line up this PCIe card with the PCIe slot. First, push this little lever back, just like that. Then you're going to want to take the GPU and slot it right in there. When you do so, make sure the clip that you pops back up, just like that, and make sure it's in all the way. There we go. Now take the same screws that you took off the expansion slots from, and we're gonna screw right in. Okay, now that that's in, time to plug in the cable. Remember, there's only a 6-pin, so the clip is on the top. That's where we're gonna plug it into. Make sure the clip's facing the top. It's in. There we go. How does that look? Looks pretty decent. I like it. I might add a couple more combs. Yeah, I think that's alright. So, the GPU is in. Time to close it back up. Alright, we're going to take the back panel and slide it back on. Nice and easy. Not many cables, so That's good to go. Okay. And the front should be good to go. We're gonna slide these cables in a little more. See if we can slide to the side. I think that's okay, right? Oh no, I guess it's still the cable here. I'll fix that. Alright, so computer's finally done. And let's plug it in, turn it on, try it out. Alright, moment of truth. Hey, it started. Alright, that's the computer. Hopefully my parents like it, because I know I do. I think it looks pretty nice. But anyways, that's gonna be it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, smash that like button down below, and comment what other tech stuff you guys want to see, you know, any reviews or whatever. You can follow all my socials down below, I'll link those too. But anyways, that's gonna be it for today's video. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.